My name is Riley Thompson. I graduated from college the same day as my older brother, Noah. Same university, same ceremony, same degree. But our journeys couldn't have been more different. You see, my parents paid every cent of Noah's tuition books, housing, food, everything. For me, nothing. No explanation, no apology. Just a quiet expectation that I'd figure it out. And I did. I juggled 3 part-time jobs, lived off instant noodles, and took out loans that will follow me for years. All while watching them post photos of Noah's dorm, Noah's study abroad, Noah's graduation cap, while never once asking how I was surviving. On graduation day, they cheered loudly when Noah's name was called. When mine came, they clapped politely, like I was a guest at my own celebration. That was the moment something in me changed. Not out of spite, but out of clarity. I didn't need their approval. I just needed to tell my story. Growing up, I never thought of myself as second best. My brother Noah and I were just 2 kids, chasing fireflies in the backyard, trading Halloween candy, building blanket forts like nothing in the world could separate us. But over time, I began to notice the shift. When Noah got a B+, it was because the teacher was too harsh. When I got an A, they asked why it wasn't higher. When he joined the soccer team, the whole family showed up with banners. When I got into the school writing club, Mom said, "That's cute, honey." It was never said outright. That's the tricky thing about favoritism, it wears a polite face. It cloaks itself in smiles and plausible deniability. But I felt it, and by the time we both applied to the same university, I had stopped expecting fairness. I just hoped for a little acknowledgement. Noah got into the School of Engineering. I got accepted to the College of Media and Communications. He announced his acceptance over dinner. Everyone clapped. My dad raised a toast. I opened mine alone in my room and quietly added it to the fridge with a magnet. Still, I told myself, this doesn't mean anything. We both got in. It'll be fine. Until Mom sat me down a week later, her hands folded neatly over a stack of paperwork. "Riley," she said gently, "we've decided to pay for Noah's tuition." I blinked. "Okay. And mine?" She sighed like I had asked for something extravagant. "We can't afford both. His program is more demanding, more promising." She didn't have to say it. "He's worth the investment. You're not." I nodded. What else could I do? I didn't yell. I didn't beg. I just swallowed the bitterness and began filling out FAFSA forms that night. From that moment on, my college experience was built on compromise. I took early shifts at the campus cafe, late shifts at the media lab, and odd jobs in between. I slept in a tiny basement dorm room, with no natural light and a broken radiator. And still, I showed up to class, every single day. Noah? He moved into a brand new dorm on the quiet side of campus. Got a new laptop, a study abroad trip to Berlin, weekly Venmo transfers labeled "for books" that I knew covered more than just books. I wasn't jealous of his life. I was just stunned by how invisible mine had become. When I showed my parents my first semester GPA 3.9, they smiled faintly and asked if Noah had seen it too. When he posted a photo in front of the Brandenburg Gate, Mom reposted it with a caption, "Our brilliant boy." When I published a short article in the student journal about campus housing injustice, no one even mentioned it at dinner. I told myself it didn't matter. Recognition wasn't why I worked hard. But the truth? I was starving not just for food, but for witnessing. For someone to say, "I see you." By the time we reached our final semester, I was worn thin. But I had also built something stronger than they realized. Resilience, a spine, and a voice I was finally ready to use. By sophomore year, I had stopped counting the number of shifts I worked. There were mornings I woke up at 5 a.m., to mop the floors of the campus cafe before class, then lectures, labs, and workshops, then back-to-back shifts at the library help desk until midnight. I ran on vending machine coffee and borrowed Wi-Fi from academic buildings that stayed open late. My dinner, most nights, was a leftover bagel or a microwaved soup packet I'd stashed in my backpack. I couldn't afford a meal plan. I couldn't afford a parking pass. I couldn't even afford to visit home during the holidays. But no one ever asked. Meanwhile, Noah was thriving. He had a schedule with built-in naps and gym sessions. He sent Snapchats from rooftop study lounges, attended coding retreats, and bragged about the professor who was basically grooming him for Tesla. And the wild part? I was proud of him. I genuinely was. He was my brother. I wanted him to succeed. But I couldn't help wondering, would he have made it if he were me? Would he survive the silence, the hunger, the exhaustion not just from work, but from knowing no one would catch him if he fell? One time, mid-semester, I got so sick I fainted during a lecture. I woke up in the campus clinic, hooked up to an IV, with the nurse telling me I was severely dehydrated and malnourished. When I called my mom scared, vulnerable, just needing a little comfort, she sighed and said, "You really need to take better care of yourself." I wanted to scream. That's all I'd been doing, taking care of myself, every second of every day, since they chose to take care of only one of us. Noah never knew about the clinic. He never asked why I missed class the next day. He never saw the stack of unopened bills on my desk, or the warning emails from loan services. Once, he offered to buy me dinner with his food card. I was grateful until Mom found out and texted him, "Don't let your sister guilt you. She chose her path." No, I didn't. I didn't choose to be invisible. I didn't choose to be the self-sufficient one because I enjoyed it. I chose it because the alternative was begging, and I had too much pride to beg for scraps from people who only looked at me when I succeeded, and even then, only to compare. There were nights I cried quietly in shared bathrooms, headphones in to drown out my sobs. Nights I stared at my reflection and wondered what made me less deserving. And yet, I kept going. Each paper I submitted, each test I aced, each 10-minute nap between jobs became a form of rebellion. I would not disappear. I made it my mission to thrive and not just survive, but to finish with dignity. Not for their approval, but for mine. And by the time senior year rolled around, I had something no one could take from me. A 3.8 GPA, a portfolio of published work, and the invitation to speak at graduation. I didn't tell my family right away, because deep down, I already knew what they'd say. "Oh, you're speaking too?" As if it was a surprise I had anything worth saying. But I had more than just something to say. I had a truth that deserved to be heard. Senior year arrived like a storm I'd been preparing for my whole life. Everything I had worked toward, the sleepless nights, the small victories, the silent sacrifices, was now compacted into a few final months. I kept my head down and my schedule tight. My planner was color-coded chaos. Thesis deadlines in red, shift rotations in blue, job applications in green. I couldn't afford to stumble now. Not when I was so close to proving them wrong, even if they never realized they'd bet against me in the first place. Noah had already lined up a postgrad internship with a well-known startup, thanks to a recommendation from his favorite professor. My own career prospects were more fragile interviews that led nowhere, polite rejection emails that thanked me for my passion and enthusiasm. Still, I kept applying. I kept submitting. I kept showing up. Because if there was one thing life had taught me, it was that nothing landed in my lap. I had to chase everything. The announcement came on a grey Tuesday afternoon. I was walking across campus, phone in one hand, a bagel in the other, when I saw the email, "Congratulations. You have been selected as the commencement speaker for the School of Media and Communications." I stopped walking. For a moment, I just stood there, letting the words sink in. And then I laughed, strange, breathless sound. Not because I was surprised, but because a small part of me had always known I'd get here. Maybe not with ease, maybe not with applause, but through grit, through will. I didn't tell my family right away. I wasn't even sure I wanted them at graduation. But I knew they'd come. They'd never miss a chance to cheer for Noah Hand if I happened to walk the stage next to him. Well, that would just be a bonus photo. 2 weeks before the ceremony, Mom called. She was giddy. Noah's graduation regalia just arrived. You should see the honors cord, so handsome. And he's thinking of adding a quote to his cap. Any ideas? She spoke for 3 minutes straight before asking, almost as an afterthought, You're graduating too, right? You said something about that? I said yes. I didn't mention the speech. I didn't mention the 3.8 GPA or the 2 articles I'd just published. I didn't remind her that I had made it here without a single dollar from them. That night, I sat at my desk and rewrote my commencement address. The version I'd submitted had been safe, polite, something they could nod through without really hearing. But the version I printed and folded into my pocket that night was different. It told the truth. Not in bitterness, not in vengeance, but in the quiet, unwavering voice of someone who had spent 4 years surviving in the cracks of a family's selective love. I wrote it for the students who never got care packages, for the ones who couldn't afford to fail, for the ones who were told, you'll figure it out, and somehow did. It wasn't just a speech anymore. It was a declaration. I wasn't invisible. I wasn't less than. And I wasn't going to shrink myself so they could keep pretending nothing had happened. They would sit in that audience. They would hear my name called, and then they would hear my story. Whether they clapped or not didn't matter, because this time I wasn't writing it for them. Graduation day arrived beneath a sky so blue it felt scripted, the kind of day people use for postcards and college brochures. I arrived early, my cap tucked under one arm, the final draft of my speech printed neatly and folded into a pocket inside my gown. My stomach twisted with something that wasn't quite fear and wasn't quite excitement, just a low, steady current of this is it. Noah found me in the line-up area behind the gymnasium. He looked calm, confident, already halfway into his next chapter. You ready? He asked, flashing that smile that had always earned applause. I nodded. Yeah, you? He chuckled. I was born ready. I almost replied, You were raised to be ready, but I swallowed it. Today wasn't about jabs. Today was about truth. When we marched into the auditorium, the air buzzed with hundreds of families packed shoulder to shoulder. Cheers erupted as names were called. Flashbulbs popped. Posters waved. I scanned the crowd and spotted our parents. Mom was wearing her pearl necklace always for special occasions. Dad had on his old blazer. Both of them were leaning forward when Noah's name echoed through the space. They stood. They clapped. They whooped. And when he took his diploma, they beamed like someone had just won a gold medal. When my name was called, they clapped too, but they didn't stand. I walked across the stage, took my diploma, nodded to the dean, and stepped aside. Then came the pause. The MC announced the next portion of the ceremony, the student address. My name again. This time, the room quieted. I moved to the podium and unfolded the paper with careful hands. For a split second, I stared at the version I had written weeks ago, the safe version, before sliding it back into my pocket. I looked out over the audience. The lights hit me hard, but I could still make out their faces. My parents, my brother, rows of classmates I had worked beside, but never quite with. Good afternoon, I began. My name is Riley Thompson, and I'm graduating with a degree in media and communications. A few polite claps, I continued. Today, I want to talk about 2 kinds of success. The kind that is supported, and the kind that is built quietly, alone, in the early hours and between shifts. Some of us walked across this stage today because we were believed in. We were funded, encouraged, told we were capable. Others like me walked despite being told we weren't. The room was still. I could feel their eyes shift. I didn't have tuition paid. I didn't get care packages or surprise visits or weekly texts asking how I was holding up. But I did have resilience. I had the will to keep going. And I had the belief that my value didn't depend on anyone else's recognition. I heard someone in the audience gasp. Probably Mom. I say this not out of resentment, but out of honesty. Because today is not just a celebration of degrees, it's a recognition of every unseen battle fought along the way. I paused. My hands were steady. To the students who were told to figure it out, this is for you. To the students who survived dorms without heating, who worked weekends, who ate cereal 3 times a day, this is yours too. I looked up and met their gaze, Mom, who now looked stunned, and Dad, whose smile had vanished. This is not just my graduation, this is my becoming. And I no longer need permission to be proud. When I stepped away from the podium, the applause started slow. Then it swelled. Not polite, not out of obligation. Real, raw. And I walked off stage, not lighter, but clearer, like I had finally spoken out loud the thing I'd been carrying all these years. And there was no going back. Outside, the sunlight was almost too bright. Balloons floated above the crowd like confetti suspended in air. People hugged, laughed. Families posed in front of the college crest, arms around their graduates, beaming with pride. I stood near a tree, just off the main courtyard, holding my cap in one hand and my phone in the other, scrolling through meaningless notifications as I waited. I didn't want to walk away, not yet. Not without hearing what they had to say. It didn't take long. Riley! My mum's voice called from behind me, sharp but quiet. I turned. She stood just a few feet away, arms crossed, pearls still resting neatly around her neck, but her smile was gone. My dad was beside her, hands in his pockets, mouth drawn tight like he was trying not to say something reckless. That speech, she began, was that really necessary? I looked at her, steady. It was the truth. You made us sound like villains, she hissed, glancing around as if someone might overhear. Like we abandoned you. I didn't answer right away. I just stared at her. Then I said, "Didn't you?" My dad stepped forward, his voice low. "This was supposed to be a proud day for the family. You turned it into something else." My chest tightened, but I kept my voice even. "You mean I told a story you didn't want to hear?" Mom shook her head. "We did what we could. Noah's program was more expensive. We had to make choices." "You made a choice," I corrected. "You chose him. Every time. And you never looked back to see if I was drowning." The silence that followed wasn't loud. It was heavy. Like a door finally creaked open to let in air no one wanted to breathe. I could see Noah lingering behind them, a few paces back, arms folded. His face was unreadable. "I'm not asking for an apology," I said, "but I won't pretend any longer. I survived college without your help. I'm proud of that. And if that makes you uncomfortable, maybe you should ask yourselves why." My mom's jaw tensed. My dad shifted his weight but didn't speak. "I never asked for more than fairness," I continued. "Not favoritism, not handouts. Just acknowledgement." They didn't move. And for a moment, I thought that was it, that I'd stand under this tree with the truth finally out, and no resolution, no peace, just air cleared and left cold. But then my dad said quietly, "Maybe we could have done things differently." It wasn't an apology, but it was something. I nodded. "Yeah, you could have." Mom looked like she wanted to say more, but she didn't. Instead, she turned away. Dad followed, hands still in his pockets, gaze down. And just like that, They were gone, disappearing into a crowd of celebration that no longer felt like mine. I didn't go to the family lunch they had planned. I didn't pose for the photos they posted later that night, smiling stiffly in frames I wasn't part of. Instead, I walked 2 blocks to a cafe I used to clean before sunrise and bought myself a slice of chocolate cake and a cappuccino. I sat by the window, alone, but not lonely, because for the first time in years, I wasn't shrinking myself to fit inside their image of me. I wasn't angling for approval I'd long since outgrown. I was exactly where I needed to be. And I was free. A week passed. Then another. No calls, no texts, no birthday card that year. Not even a like on the graduation photo I finally posted alone, holding my diploma in front of the college fountain with no caption. It was quiet. Too quiet. But not unfamiliar. I'd lived in this silence before, back when I turned 16 and got my first job, while Noah got his first car. Back when I stayed home sick, and no one noticed until dinner. Back when the school counselor called home because I hadn't eaten lunch for 3 days, and Mom responded, "She's dramatic, she'll be fine." Silence wasn't new, but this time, it felt final. Until my phone lit up one night at 1:14 a.m. Noah. Hey, I've been thinking about your speech. Can we talk? I stared at it for a long time. I'd just finished revising my resume for the 5th time that week and was lying awake. The hum of the fan, the only sound in my tiny studio apartment. The city outside never slept, but inside, it felt like everything had paused. I typed back slowly. Me. Only if it's not just about making me the villain. He responded right away. Noah. It's not. I promise. The next day, we met at a coffee shop not far from Campusone, of the few we both used to visit, though never together. He looked the same. Crisp polo, smartwatch, hair gelled perfectly, but there was something in his eyes I hadn't seen before. Tired, or maybe aware. He didn't start with small talk. Just sat down and said, "I didn't know." I blinked. Didn't know what? He looked down, wrapped his hands around the coffee cup. Any of it. I mean, I knew you were working a lot. I knew you didn't have the same stuff. But I didn't realize how deep it went. How much it cost you. I said nothing. I thought... He shook his head. I thought you were doing it by choice. That you were strong, independent. That you didn't want help. I stared at him. You thought I enjoyed working 3 jobs while watching you get everything handed to you? He looked ashamed. I guess I never stopped to question it. Mom and Dad said you were figuring it out. That you liked doing things your way. I believed them. That's the thing, I said. Voice quiet but firm. Everyone believed them. So no one asked me. Not once. He nodded, eyes fixed on the table. I'm sorry. I was blind. And selfish. I see that now. I took a sip of my coffee, letting the silence hang between us. It wasn't angry, it was real. Honest. He added, "You were right, in your speech. I had every door opened. You had to break yours down. I didn't even hear the sound." There it was. The sentence that made something inside me ease. "I don't hate you," I said. "But I needed to hear you say that." He looked up. "I want to be better. I mean that." And in that moment, I believed him. It wasn't a grand apology. It wasn't fireworks or redemption. But it was a beginning. Later, as we stood outside, I said, "Tell them. Tell Mom and Dad what you just told me." He hesitated, then nodded. "I will." And even if he never did, even if they never called or admitted what they'd done, it was enough that someone finally saw me. Not the independent one. Not the background sibling. Just Riley. A person who worked hard, broke down walls, and finally got to speak. That summer felt like a quiet kind of healing. I moved into a small apartment across the river, just one bedroom. No dishwasher. A view of a parking lot, but it was mine. No one else's name on the lease. No questions about where I was going. No expectations to play the role of the grateful sibling anymore. I started my job as an editorial assistant at a small publishing house. The pay wasn't glamorous, but it was steady, honest. I spent my days surrounded by words, manuscripts, voices waiting to be heard. It felt poetic after years of not being listened to. I was now helping shape stories that mattered. Some days were hard. I'd come home exhausted, staring at loan balances and frozen dinners, wondering if I'd ever truly make it. But there was peace, too, a new kind of quiet, one I had earned. A few weeks into the job, I got a letter forwarded from my old college mailbox. The envelope was pale pink, with careful cursive handwriting I didn't recognize. Inside was a short note. I heard your speech. I was sitting 4 rows behind your family. I don't know you, but I want you to know I needed to hear it. I've spent my life being the second-choice daughter, too. Thank you for being brave. L.M. I read it 3 times, then pinned it to the corkboard above my desk. Because that's when it really hit me. My story wasn't just mine. It was echoing inside other people, too. Noah kept his promise. He spoke to our parents. He told them what I'd been through, not the dramatic version, not exaggerated, just the facts. Mom's response, according to him, was silence. Dad said, "Well, she turned out okay, didn't she?" It wasn't surprising, but it still hurt. Eventually, they reached out short, careful messages. Mom sent a photo from a family brunch with the caption, "Wish you were here." Dad wrote, "We're proud of everything you've achieved. Let us know if you want to reconnect." I didn't reply. Not out of spite, but because healing isn't always about reopening doors. Sometimes it's about knowing you don't have to walk through them again. Instead, I wrote back to LM. "Thank you for seeing me. I think we're both starting something new, something we get to define on our own terms. And maybe that's what moving forward meant. Not erasing the past, not pretending everything was fine, but choosing who I let into my new life. Choosing peace. Choosing me." On weekends, I wandered into secondhand bookstores, flipped through dog-eared poetry books and half-filled journals. I started writing again. Not just emails or deadlines, but real writing. The kind that came from the quiet corners of who I was before the noise of being overlooked. Noah and I kept in touch. Sometimes just memes or Spotify links. Sometimes longer texts. Slowly, we were learning how to be siblings again, not as the favorite and the forgotten, but as 2 people who finally saw each other. One night he texted, "You should write your own book one day." I stared at the screen and smiled. Maybe I would. Not for recognition, not for applause, but for the girl who once sat in the corner of the dining hall, eating leftover bagels and wondering if anyone even noticed she was there. That girl had grown up, and she was just getting started. 6 months later, I stood outside a building with my name on the employee directory. Not in bold, not in lights, but typed clearly next to my new title, Associate Editor. It had been a quiet climb. No parades, no parental applause, but every step had been mine. I still remembered the girl I used to be sitting on her twin bed freshman year, wrapped in a second-hand hoodie, poring over spreadsheets to figure out how to make 43 stretch across 3 days. That girl thought strength meant silence, that being proud was selfish, that asking for help made you a burden. Now, I knew better. Strength is speaking when your voice shakes. Pride is standing tall even when no one claps. And asking for help, that's not weakness. That's wisdom. I didn't erase my past. I didn't rewrite the story to make myself the hero and everyone else the villain. What I did was reclaim it. There was a moment late one night. while editing a memoir from a woman who had survived more than I could ever imagine when I realized something vital. I had survived, too. Not war or disaster, but emotional abandonment, the slow drip of being dismissed, the hunger of always coming second, the bruises that didn't show up on skin but lived quietly in the questions you carry for years. Was I ever really enough? And the answer, now, is yes. I always was. A few weeks before Christmas, Noah texted, "Coming to town. Want to grab dinner? Just us." We met at a Thai place near my apartment. The food was average, the lighting harsh, but the conversation felt easy, familiar, and for Onsono weighed down by unspoken history. Midway through his pad thai, Noah leaned in and said, "They're still trying to figure out why you're not talking to them." I sipped my water. I don't think they're actually confused. I think they're just not ready to admit the truth. He nodded. They want to redo. A clean slate. I don't, I said. It wasn't anger in my voice. It was clarity. I'm not holding a grudge. I've just moved on. That chapter closed. They didn't even read it. And now they want a sequel. Noah looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. That makes sense. You don't owe them anything. And that was the beauty of it. I didn't. I wasn't obligated to smile through forced reunions or pretend that their selective affection was love. I wasn't obligated to explain myself, shrink myself, or fix their discomfort. I could just live. Free. I walked home that night under a sky, dotted with quiet stars. The wind sharp but invigorating. My apartment was still small. Still creaked when I opened the windows. Still had mismatched mugs and a wobbly chair. But it was home. Sometimes, healing isn't grand. It's the way your heart doesn't clench when your mum's name pops up on your phone. It's the way you look at a family photo and no longer feel like you need to be in it. It's the moment you realize that the applause you were waiting for doesn't matter anymore. Because your life? It's already speaking loud enough. I printed out a quote and taped it above my desk. They told me I wasn't enough. So I became more than they could imagine. Every time I see it, I remember graduation. I remember the applause. I remember my mother's stunned silence. And most of all, I remember how it felt to finally be heard. Not just by others, but by myself. Riley Thompson may not be their favorite child, but she is finally her own person. And for the first time ever, that's enough. More than enough.